roundtable discussion on sustainable development. This will be our last technical session. So today we have 5 speakers, 5 participants, and it will be chaired by Professor Luc Tawi. So he is a professor at Ghent University and also Tongji University. He is the director of the China platform at the Ghent University. I think we all know him. He's also well known in the Chinese community in Belgium. He's also well known in the construction industry, both in Belgium and in China. He's done a lot of research related to sustainable development in the construction sector. So now I will leave the stage to the 5 experts and then to Luc.
Okay, thank you, Lynn, for the nice introduction. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. So, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be the moderator for this session. This panel discussion also related to sustainable development. We have, apart from me, we have 4 other participants. That's Nele de Billy to my left here, Nicolas Gaudelet to my left, and your right, François Cerneos, directly right from me, and Dr. Wang Li. Perhaps we can just start. May I ask you that you just present yourself briefly, 2 or 3 sentences, and it's easier that you do it than I have to read it from the paper here.
Everyone, hello, you saw my work. I'm an architect and a civil engineer, polytech engineer. I don't specialize, I'm a generic. And I lived in China for 20 years. I work on both platform, European and Chinese platform. And we aim to work on the most sustainable project as much as we can doing business. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nele de Billy, professor at Ghent University and director of the Manuel van de Putte Laboratory. And my field is mainly durability and sustainability of cement-bound construction materials.
So my name is François Cerneos. I am an agronomist, a general agronomist, a field agronomist actually. So I'm not a researcher. And I've been working in China for nearly 20 years, but not temporarily, not permanently. I do training sessions there. And I've been working mostly on potato, which is a very important crop in China.
I'm Li Wan, the founder of CEO of China University of Belgium. The company was founded in 2017. I'm also the coordinator of EU Horizon 2020 project. There is a charter project that has the low carbon mobility algorithm to be demonstrated in a China city in Nanjing City. And this is the only one city was selected by the EU project. And worldwide, totally 10 cities worldwide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the introducing yourself. So you see, these are 4 people with different background, so we can discuss various topics related to sustainability. Let me start with the young lady at my left-hand side. So as Nele said already, she's dealing with concrete and cement, and also, in fact, cement replacement. The ones who were in the previous session in this room have heard about her research. Also, there was here someone from the Belgian Cement Federation. So, Nele, in fact, we all know in the meantime that one of the major contributions to the CO2 emission is particularly cement production. So we are going then to use other alternative binders, also going to green buildings and so on. So I don't know whether you can compare what's happening in Belgium in your own research group and what's happening in China, both at the field of research or applications. And you see a difference, or what's your personal vision, or what is feasible in the near future and in, let's say, the
be honest, at research stage. We are collaborating with some colleagues in China, but mostly in the field of durability, which also, of course, relates to sustainability, alternative binders, and so on as well. Well, I don't know that well what the policy is currently in China. I know that they're also trying to be more sustainable, but what are the goals that they have set for the future? I would have to go more in depth for studying that. Well, we know that here in Europe there is this goal of a carbon neutral construction industry by 2050, which is, I think, not so easy to reach, although the colleague from Fabelsem who presented here was very optimistic about this, saying that he thought it could be reached even before 2050. But for this, a lot of different pathways have to be followed, not only alternative binders, more efficient energy use, new fuels and so on, but also it will depend for a large part on carbon capture and storage, and I think that's still a difficult issue to tackle. In comparison with China, of course, China is a very big producer of cement, so probably the problem of carbon dioxide emissions from clinker production cannot be underestimated there. I think years ago they were having more than 50% of the worldwide cement production. So I think that's probably still the same, or maybe even more, because construction industry in China is still very well blooming, I believe. So really a lot of cement production there, so it will be even more important there to tackle this issue of reducing carbon dioxide related emissions. Also, I think they still have a lot of the industrial byproducts still that we are now phasing out. For instance, coal-fired electricity production that is producing fly ashes. I think in China there are still a lot of fly ashes available, whereas now in Belgium we do not have local production of fly ashes anymore, which is a useful byproduct for replacing part of the clinker and reducing carbon dioxide emissions from cement production. But of course, coal-fired electricity production has its own problems that should be tackled. So that might be some differences, different byproducts that are considered and so on. And of course the huge need of, especially for concrete, for use of cement for concrete production, the huge population of China, the huge amount of cement that is produced there makes it very important to have China on the wagon for more sustainable cement production.
Okay, thanks for sharing these ideas. So, of course, concrete, yes, for housing, buildings, and so on. Nicola, you also need concrete, I assume, and you cannot do without it, well, so far. So, green buildings, that's always a hot topic. You have some experience, or a long experience, even in China. Can you compare the approaches, like here in Europe, and more particularly in Belgium, and what you experienced in China, and both in, let's say, public housing as official buildings? I don't know where your experience is exactly. So, if you could make this kind of comparison, if possible, and also to show some solutions.
Yeah, solutions are, it's a wide answer, but there's a big difference between China and Belgium is that in China there is not really a private owned land. In Belgium, most of the bidders or the clients have their own land. It's a different approach, and it's easier to invest on your own land, of course, but the scale issue is important. In Europe, we built most of our buildings here are between, let's say, 100 square meter to maximum 10,000 square meter, 15,000. But now our project we are doing now in Beijing is 170,000 square meter for one project. So it's a completely different scale. China is working a lot on sustainability and, of course, with different angles than Europe. In Europe, we are more focusing on materials research. I talked about it, hemp, bio materials, or bio-based materials. And in China, we are more working on the global scale, energy production, and very high efficiency in city design. Something we cannot do anymore in Europe because our cities are completely built up and there is no room anymore. If I can put a very important point, in China now there is an important fact. In the cities we are keeping some lands in the city to produce energy at a local scale. Because we still have room in the city, in the new cities. We don't have it in Europe anymore, but it's important in Europe, I think, how to think the future cities and how to deal with local consumption, waste management, water treatment, energy transportation, traffic management, car issue, parking issue, etc. Because energy and low carbon strategies are coming also from these.
Did you say local energy production?
Yes.
What kinds of?
Well, if you centralize your energy production or your waste treatment, you have to move the waste, or you have to move the energy from very far away to a local point. From a city scale, it's very difficult because we don't have the surface needed. But we have to think local for small-scale architecture and small-scale area, and then bigger needs in energy for other industries, companies. This is a global answer, and it's never from a high-tech point of view or just an urban planning point of view or materials. The answer is very global and tackle many different strategies or and level in the societies. So we need, as I say, we need a lot of generalists, people who can understand all the scales and all the components of environment and put them together. We don't have these people enough, not enough. And in teaching, I think we have to teach our students in Belgium, in China, these topics much more.
Well, as you said, I think in Chinese cities, or at the border of the cities, there is still room for rather big development projects. My impression is that these new projects, this is very eco-friendly. Sustainability is one of the top priorities, and so that's my experience. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I can confirm that the wish is there, and that sometimes, see, it's a great wish. It's in all the cahiers de charge and the requirements, but how do you apply these sustainable goals in reality? And there is a missing link over there, I think. Again, the role of developers, architects is very important on gathering all these elements and how to go from philosophy, sustainable philosophy, to action. And we saw here on the presentation a very nice work done by a landscape architect working on the park. He was working on social habits. He was working also on earth, making an echo to the earth, working with local trees, local species, different kinds of biotopes development in the city. It was very interesting, but we need more of these kind of people and projects.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, let's switch to another topic. Food. Food is, of course, a basic requirement for all of us, very important. I think in countries like this and also in most places in China it's no problem, but when we look worldwide, starvation is a basic problem in many areas. So I would like to ask to Francois how you see the future in food production, because yes, the population, the global population is still increasing worldwide, so there's more need for food and so on. They should all be produced, also be produced in a sustainable way and so on. Well, so we have first, again, let's say a comparison between Belgium and China, but if you also could look, let's say, to a much larger scale, how you see the future, or what are new approaches, how to deal with that.
Thank you, Luc. Yes, food is a very important problem, of course. Housing and food, they come together. Actually, the first thing that I observed when I traveled to China was that compared to other countries which I visited before, like India or some countries in Africa, starvation has almost disappeared. I think we can say it has disappeared. And it was not true about 40 years ago. 40 years ago, there were still people starving in China. Now it has disappeared. I never saw people starving when I go to the countryside and so on. So maybe there are some, but very, very few. And this is an extraordinary achievement, because that's why all the countries in the world are trying to do for many, many years, from international meeting to another international meeting. The number one target is reduce starvation in the world. But the only country in which I saw extraordinary results is China. Although, of course, it is not easy to do. So now what about our food system? So our food system in Belgium, I had the opportunity to look at it very precisely, because we, in our small city, that is located between Brussels and Tournai, about 50 kilometers away from Brussels. So in that small city, we had a small project funded by the Wallonne Ministry of Environment to try to relocate, so increase the localization of the production of food. So they want that the local people eat more local food. So the first step that we did in this project last year was to have a diagnosis, try to see how much of local food we eat. Well, I can tell you that we eat about 5% of local food. I mean, 5% of the food that we take is local. All the rest is coming from quite far away. I don't mean from tropical countries only. I don't talk about mango and rice. I talk about potato, I talk about bread. For example, the main crop in my city is wheat. We produce maybe 20 more, or even more, I think 50 more wheat that we need, but we do not produce wheat that is suitable to produce good bread. And we produce wheat that is suitable to make animal feed, and we sell it on the international market. And the few farmers who produce bread wheat, they also sell it to mills to make flour that will be sold on the international market. So almost nobody eats flour or bread made by flour produced by a local farmer. That's just incredible. I mean, this is not. This is the opposite of sustainability, because it creates huge travel and management cost and environmental elements in the cost. So it's not a monetary cost, but it's environmental cost. So I was quite impressed by this result. I was supposing it was a little bit like that, but not that much. So from our point of view, we have to really rethink about how our food system is organized. But of course, looking at one small city is not a very accurate way to do. So we have to do that on a much more wider approach. But still, it shows that there is a real problem. So in China, I did not read studies about it, but what we observe is that quite more than what we consume is local food. I mean, a lot of vegetables are consumed from the local production. A lot of the staple food is even consumed from the local production. the potato for which I'm a specialist, I think at least 70% of the potatoes that the farmers grow in the villages are cultivated for the local consumption. Of course, in the countryside, but also in the small towns, the local towns, not the faraway towns. So that's much more rational, of course. So that's one first reflection, is that in the food system, we have to rethink this food system. And there is a picture that is the hourglass of the food system is an hourglass. You know this shape, like that. Huh? So there are plenty of consumers, there are plenty of producers, and in the middle there are a few distributors and buyers who will do the wholesale. So actually, those wholesalers, they are extremely powerful and they are extremely non-transparent. And so we have to do something about that. That's my first reflection. The second reflection is about the way we have increased the yield, especially in Europe, but in China also. So we have increased the yield, especially by using chemical fertilizers and pesticides and mechanizations. So these three things are just energy transformed into work, into different kind of very sophisticated chemicals like pesticides, and into nitrogen fertilizer especially. So actually our agriculture in Europe, or in Belgium especially, but also in many parts of China, is really too much energy consuming. So we have to rethink also the agricultural system and try to find out ways to reduce that use of energy, probably accepting that the yield of the crops will be reduced, but reducing far more the energy consumption per kilogram produced. Therefore, there are a lot of research that are needed. This early afternoon, I gave the example of biofungicides to replace the chemical fungicides. So the chemical fungicides, they require a lot of energy to be produced. And they are harmful also, they are toxic. So there is a need for more research on biofungicides, which should be non-toxic and probably will be not as efficient, but will contribute to a much less unsustainable system.
Okay, thank you for these thoughts. Then you mentioned also transportation, of course. Then we come to the automotive sector. Well, I have some experience with it also, although my background is structural engineering. I have some background in it because in Ghent we have the Volvo car plant, which is for the cars is still, I think, the largest plant in Europe. Not worldwide, I'm not sure, but and I also have been to the Volvo sites in Daqing, in the north of China, and also in Chengdu. And I've seen it under construction also when it was operating, because it was an engineer from Ghent who was in charge of the construction of these plants. And so now in already for 2 years, I think, or 3 years, in the Ghent Volvo car plant, batteries are produced. Also now they will change. We also have a plant of Volvo trucks in Ghent. Also now they are moving to electric trucks with batteries and so on. So, well, my impression of traveling in China and having contacts with people there is that China is much more advanced in this field of electronic vehicles, battery production, and so on. For instance, I've been once in the BYD plant in Shenzhen. BYD is now on the market also here in Belgium. So, Mr. Wan, I would like to ask you, how do you see, or yes, you compare Belgium and Europe, let's say, with China, what I also experience in many fields is that the speed of change is much faster in China than in Belgium or in Europe. I think this is also, electronic vehicles is also a typical field where this is applicable. How do you see this moving? And now that we also have, well, some changes in energy supply, prices of energy, and so on. How do you see the future for these electric vehicles, and also how can you compare with the different regions I was talking about?
Thank you. This is a wide topic, a very hot topic. So, basically, I have a very fast introduction about myself. So my background, my PhD was finished in BUP, and my professor was the chairman of European Electric Vehicle Association, Professor Gaston Maggetto. When I was a graduate, I was doing the research on the inductive charging system, the fully automatic inductive charging system for electric vehicles. But at that time, when I graduated, the industry was not flying. So I went to the microelectronics. The microelectronics, the ST, the biggest microelectronics in the Europe side, they have a very advanced research institute in Germany. So I worked there for 10 years. So that 10 years is very important because it compensates the electric vehicle as a big current. And microelectronics is have, let's say, very small size, small current, which are now that have the infusion of the whole automotive industry worldwide. Okay, come back to your question. So indeed, from my eyes, the automotive industry transformation can be divided into two phases. The first phase is electrification. The second phase is the digitalization, or we can say is autonomous driving, is mainly focus. And you are true that on the side, the electrification in China side has been, let's say, is close to the end. The industrialization is not a researcher. So you can say that China side have maybe that, let's say, 100 types of the electric vehicle cars. And every automobile car manufacturers are making their own electric vehicles. And you can see that in the China side, we have the mega factories in the batteries. In the batteries of many kinds, and also that for the next generation of half-solid battery or solid battery for the next generation. So, for me, the first phase is almost in the completion. The second phase is for the autonomous driving. And we see that, let's say, the whole challenge in front of the European side, as well in the China side, is more or less the same. So basically, we are more or less, from the industry point of view, is on the same starting point. The philosophy and the model for the electric vehicles, doesn't know, we can seldom see that, let's say, the big companies put money on the combustion, let's say, the traditional cars for the autonomous driving now. It's all the research is on electric vehicle. And this side, let's say, is more difficult than we thought. So you can see the rollout of the autonomous driving is still in the experimental phase in terms of the manufacturing and in terms of, let's say, the business model. For instance, the autonomous driving, let's say, no-man rental cars, etc.
And also in insurance companies.
Yes, indeed. Because the L3 is a big headache for the insurance company. Because, for instance, for the L3, it's the algorithm decides, and half is the driver decide. So when the car, suppose, have an accident, the current, let's say, the system and the testing, let's say, equipment cannot tell that who is the most the responsibility should take. Who will pay the money for the loss? So many, let's say, the car manufacturers are adopting the strategy is either it's L2 minus, which fits in the classical insurance system, or L4 directly, because this one, when there's a car accident, is absolutely, let's say, the responsibility is from the algorithm development side, so the car manufacturer side. So in the sense of that, let's say, basically that we developed the next generation for the Europe side, and in the China side, we have the same opportunity and have the same challenge. So let's work together.
Okay, thanks for this last message. So we have heard about four different sectors, I would say. I don't know whether one of you has a particular question to one of the people here or to myself. Yes, please.
Yeah, I do actually. So today we discussed a lot about sustainability. We covered a lot about the economic part and the environmental part. But I'm curious what the collaboration between Europe and China can benefit, like the social part of sustainability, such as social equity. So I'm quite curious about your point of views. Thank you.
Very good question. I don't know who get.
So I will risk an answer or some elements of answer, but I think about that very often, and my students and my colleagues often ask me my opinion about that. I think the big clash is the political system, of course. We have to take into account that the problems are extremely urgent. Extremely urgent. In Belgium, we understand this emergency only last year. I mean, only a very small minority of people know that since more than 50 years, scientists explain that climate change will come around 2030, and the consequences will be dramatic if we don't change. That is said since about 50 years. It was said first as a possibility, then it became something probable, and now it is said it is definitely sure. The question is not if it will happen, but when and how exactly in every place. So emergency is really there. From my point of view, I told you that what surprised me most when I went to China, compared to my experience in India or in African countries, is to see that people were not starving. When we discuss about that with my colleagues and friends, they often say, yes, but China is not free, and you have a lot of political prisoners and this kind of thing. And they compare China and Belgium, or they compare China and Europe. But this is a wrong comparison. It is completely wrong. When you compare this kind of large system, you have to adopt a right or an accurate systemic position. So you must compare two systems that can be compared. So the scale of China makes it not accurate to compare only with Belgium or only with a part of Europe or even only with Europe. Actually, why is Europe democratic and free, like free between brackets? Why? Because we took a lot of resources from Africa, for example, and from other places, but if you want to remain schematic. So actually the right comparison should be Europe plus Africa compared to China. So then you just have to compare the results. And I told you I traveled in, I think, 15 or provinces of China, something like that. What I see is just amazing results, just amazing. I traveled in India in 1982, and 2 years ago in 2020 I traveled again, 2019, I traveled again to India. I saw the biggest problems are still there, exactly like they were 40 years ago. And that big problem is people having nothing to eat and starving in the street. So, of course, it's not a nice talk for Western people when I say that. But, okay, that's a first part of answer to your question.
Okay, yes, that's a very, I don't think we have time for other questions.
Can I add one word?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay. For the sustainability, because the worldwide, the European side and China side are facing the same problem, because we are deep on the earth. We only have one earth. So what we can do, the challenge is 3R, the reduce, reuse, and recycle from everybody.
But some have to reduce more.
But if I may.
Yeah, okay.
If I may, no, because I think it's super important when you speak about social system that we are one planet, as you said, but mutual understanding is the first. Because two societies are completely different. They have different background, different habits, different beliefs, different social structure. But what I see is that many European people don't understand Chinese system or Chinese society, as well as Chinese society doesn't understand European societies deeply. That is very different from American societies. I have to say it. And this mutual understanding is the base for sustainability on this united Earth that link China to Europe.
Just short.
Yeah, very short, yeah, thank you. So it's a question to Mr. Nicolas. So we are talking about the social aspect. So I was wondering, when you are doing this urban planning in China also, so do you take into account the equity for people to access the green space, for example?
Yes, of course, it's the base, because we must provide 40% of green space in all the cities designed, and in a certain quantity for each block. It's huge. It's higher than any European city, for example. It's not always real green, huh? Sometimes, it's not but still 40% is a lot, and landscape culture is a crucial element for Chinese culture and for Chinese people. You spend more time in the parks than at home.
Well, as mentioned, in fact, yes, sustainability is typically a topic that's a worldwide problem. It doesn't stop at the borders, and I see this as a unique opportunity, in fact. Instead of creating geopolitical tensions, this would be a good opportunity to work together with the big blocks, let's say, instead of having competition, work together to solve the problem, to give everybody a better earth, let's say. If I just may give a final remark also, we are talking here, of course, about cooperation with China, Belgium. Well, I also mentioned it in my presentation, and it was also mentioned in other presentations. What we are really looking forward at is being able again to travel to China, to have in-person discussions. We have a lot of online events we organize, of course. Here, this annual event, also nice that we can be here all together. But, well, we can continue our existing cooperation, but to establish new initiatives, new cooperation initiatives, yeah, that's in fact not possible when you do it online. So, Mr. Councillor, perhaps, I don't know what you will say in your closing remarks, but if you could give some ideas or suggestions what the future will be about that, that would be very much appreciated also. So thank you all for panel members here for contributing to this discussion, and also you for listening to us and asking some questions. So thank you very much.